In Secret Window, Johnny Depp famously said the most important part of the story is the ending. While that might be a slight exaggeration, it is safe to say that a good ending can make or break a horror movie. It's no surprise that drinking enough water is important. After all, the human body is about 60% water. According to the Journal of Biological Chemistry, the lungs are made up of about 84% water, kidneys are 79%, and the heart and brain are 73%. Fortunately for Fright fans, the 21st century has been full of fantastic finales that have sent us scrambling under the covers in fear, and from ghostly apparitions to bloodthirsty vampires, here are the greatest. Even Bone Dry Bones are 32% water. Growing up, most of us were told to aim for 8 8-ounce glasses of water every day, but, as Healthline pointed out, the origin of this guideline is unclear and it has not actually been supported by scientific research. And no, Secret Window won't be making the list, but you should be aware that we're about to dish out a lot of spooky spoilers. The Others 2001, directed by Alejandro Amenabar. The Others is an atmospheric film that follows the unfortunate Stewart family, Roman Catholic Grace Nicole Kidman, and her creepy kids, Alekina Mann and James Bradley, as they slowly but surely realize their home is haunted. The Institute of Medicine (IOM) recommends women aim for 91 ounces (2.7 liters) of fluids each day, while men should get 125 ounces (3.7 liters) daily. Doors are closing by themselves, and the piano is playing on its own. There's a couple roaming the hallways, a dead boy hiding behind the curtains, and, worst of all, a freaky blind lady lurking in the shadows. But when Grace and her children stumble upon a séance in the attic, they suddenly realize they're the ones who are dead. The IOM noted, however, that not all of your fluid intake has to come from plain water, but all beverages and food. And everyone's exact hydration requirements vary. As the memories come flooding back, Grace remembers that she murdered her children after temporarily going insane. After realizing what she'd done, Grace killed herself, damning her family to an eternity inside their creaky mansion. It's a gut punch of a twist, especially thanks to the look of horror on Kidman's face. Factors such as exercising, temperature, illness, and pregnancy can all impact fluid needs. While every person's needs are slightly different, the dangers of dehydration are universal. It also changes the entire film when you realize the so-called ghosts that have been scaring the Stewarts are actually living people who've moved into Grace's old home. We all know the obvious symptoms of dehydration, such as thirst, a dry mouth, and dark-colored urine. But when it comes to chronic dehydration, there are many other subtle ways your body can communicate that it needs more fluids. If you're not drinking enough water, you may experience weight gain. If you're not sure why you've put on a few extra pounds, it could be because you're not drinking enough water. As registered dietitian Megan Wong of AlgaeCal told Health Digest, drinking water increases feelings of satiety, meaning a feeling of fullness. This could be why researchers have found a link between obesity and inadequate hydration. One study, for example, led by Dr. They're the ones being haunted by Grace and her kids, and they were so freaked out that they even asked a spiritualist, the blind lady, for assistance. It's a pretty brilliant ending, and we've got to give Amenabar credit for pulling it off just 2 years after The Sixth Sense shocked moviegoers with a similar twist. Saw, 2004. These days, Jigsaw is one of the most famous bad guys to ever torture someone on the big screen. But in 2004, when the first Saw film hit theaters, audiences had no idea what the infamous serial killer actually looked like. In fact, for most of the movie, everybody suspected that Zepp Hindle, Michael Emerson of Lost fame, was the psycho who chained up poor Adam Lee Wanell in that bathroom dungeon. But after our hero bashes Zepp to death, he discovers a cassette that reveals the hospital orderly was just another victim in Jigsaw's game. Tammy Chong, and published in the Annals of Family Medicine in 2016, examined the health habits of over 18,000 adults and found that those who weren't well hydrated were more likely to have an elevated body mass index (BMI). One reason for the connection between hydration and BMI may be the fact that people often misinterpret thirst as hunger, thus filling up on calories when what they really need is fluids. According to the Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation, 37% of individuals mistake thirst for hunger. And as Adam begins to process this new bit of info, we watch in horror as a dead body, which has been lying on the bathroom floor for the whole movie, crawls up off the floor. Yep, This corpse is the killer himself, John Kramer, Tobin Bell, and when Jigsaw walks out of the bathroom, he leaves his latest victim chained to a pipe, parting with his trademark line, "Game over." The Mist 2007. Honestly, the ending of The Mist needs no introduction. It's bleak, ugly, nihilistic, and far darker than Stephen King's original story. Registered dietitian Trista Best explained that this mix-up in signals can cause late-night binge eating, overeating at meal times, and chronic snacking. The next time you think you're hungry, Wong suggested drinking a glass of water before immediately reaching for a snack. If you're having heart trouble, you may not be drinking enough water. Not drinking enough water can have major consequences for your cardiovascular health. According to the Heart Foundation, when you are dehydrated, your blood volume, or the amount of blood circulating through your body, decreases. To compensate, your heart beats faster, increasing your heart rate and your blood pressure. Your blood also retains more sodium when you're dehydrated, thus thickening your blood and making it more difficult to circulate through your body. Science Daily noted that dehydration increased individuals' risk for cardiac disease and arteriosclerosis, the hardening of artery walls, even among young, otherwise healthy individuals. If you're at all familiar with scary cinema, then you know the movie involves a supermarket full of people surrounded by an otherworldly mist. Unfortunately for the people trapped in the store, this freaky fog is full of Lovecraftian monsters with some pretty sharp teeth. However, things aren't much better inside, especially with a religious nut, Marcia Gay Harden, encouraging the crowd to perform a human sacrifice. Deciding to take their chances with the flesh-eating bugs, a group of survivors led by artist David Drayton, Thomas Jane, drives into the mist, but they don't get very far before realizing escape is futile. In the article, Stavros Kavouras, associate professor and coordinator of the exercise science program at the University of Arkansas, argued that when it comes to heart health, dehydration is as bad for the body as smoking a cigarette. Alarmingly, even very mild dehydration can be bad for your heart. With no hope in sight, David and his crew agree that death by pistol is far preferable than death via demon spiders. Cue one of the most controversial finales in horror history when David mercifully executes his friends and his own son. Out of bullets, he staggers into the mist, hoping some creature will end his life. And that's when the mist clears and the military rolls by, ready for battle. If only David had waited just a few seconds, his son would have been okay, and we all could have been spared that emotional devastation. You're Next 2011, from the twisted minds of Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett, You're Next is equal parts horrific and hilarious. Kavouras explained, the degree of dehydration when these changes occur is at less than 2% dehydration, which is around the threshold when people start feeling thirsty. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States, and while there are many contributing factors, dehydration is an easily preventable one. If your blood pressure is out of whack, you may not be drinking enough water. According to Healthline, dehydration can both raise and lower blood pressure, both of which can be dangerous if left unchecked. Without enough fluids in your system, blood volume decreases, which lowers blood pressure. On the other hand, dehydration-induced low blood volume and an increased concentration of salt in the bloodstream trigger the release of the hormone vasopressin. The plot follows a group of upper-class people traveling to an isolated mansion for a family reunion. But hey, family reunions are often awkward and uncomfortable, and that's especially true if a trio of killers show up sporting animal masks and carrying all sorts of weapons. With a little inside help, the murderers begin picking off the family members one by one, but they meet their match in Erin, Sharni Vinson, an Australian who grew up in a survivalist compound. In other words, she's the perfect person to have around when mercenaries show up, as she can take villains down with everyday items like screwdrivers and blenders. Unfortunately, her tactics backfire after she sets an axe trap above a door. This hormone causes narrowing and tightening of blood vessels that, in turn, lead to an increase in blood pressure. The Mayo Clinic noted that a blood pressure reading below 90/60ths of a millimeter Hg is generally considered low. In the final minutes of the movie, a police officer finally shows up and mistakes Aaron for one of the killers, putting a bullet into our hero. But things get even grislier when the cop tries to come inside. Low blood pressure hypotension can cause many symptoms, including dizziness and fainting, fatigue, blurred vision, and nausea. Despite Aaron's warnings, the officer steps through, the axe swings down, and a bloody title card pops up onscreen as we're treated to the wonderfully ironic, looking for the magic. Accidental death has never been this entertaining. The Cabin in the Woods 2012, possibly the most meta-horror movie ever made. The Cabin in the Woods follows a bunch of college students who foolishly spend a weekend in a creepy forest. If it drops too low, your organs won't receive the oxygen and other nutrients they need, resulting in life-threatening hypovolemic shock. High blood pressure, hypertension, on the other hand, is a major risk factor for stroke and heart disease. It's also a common problem in the United States, affecting approximately 103 million Americans, almost half of U.S. adults, according to the American Heart Association. Constantly exhausted? You may need to drink more water if you constantly feel tired and it's a struggle to make it through your day. You're not alone. In 2017, the group Occupational Health and Safety, citing research conducted by the National Safety Council, reported that 76% of survey participants felt tired at work, 53% felt less productive, and 44% had difficulty concentrating. While there are many reasons you may be feeling fatigued and distracted, dehydration is an often overlooked cause. A 2012 study published in the Journal of Nutrition found that even mild dehydration of only 1.36% led female participants to feel more fatigue inertia, and made tasks seem more difficult. Not getting enough fluids also impacts sleep quality. Naturally, their little getaway doesn't go as planned, and they quickly discover they're meant to be sacrifices in an elaborate ritual to please some angry ancient entities. With a family of undead rednecks hot on their trail, the two remaining survivors, Kristen Connolly and Fran Kranz, find themselves trapped in an underground bunker, surrounded by a bunch of goons with machine guns. Without any other choice, our heroes unleash an army of monsters, resulting in one of the wildest, you won't believe it until you see it, sequences in horror cinema. Pretty much every creature you can imagine shows up, ready to do some damage. According to the Sleep Foundation, dehydration can make you feel sluggish during the day, but it can also negatively affect your sleep, making you even more tired the next day. We've got a knockoff Pennywise, an imitation Pinhead, and masked murderers straight out of The Strangers. Going to bed dehydrated can even worsen snoring, which is disruptive to a good night's sleep. If you're worried that your morning coffee is doing more harm than good, though, you can relax. There's a giant snake, an enormous bat, and one unfriendly unicorn. According to Harvard Medical School, drinking caffeine in moderation does not lead to excessive fluid loss and dehydration. Are muscle cramps a result of not drinking enough water? Muscles are made up of about 80% water, so it makes sense that dehydration could lead to muscle cramps, especially when it accompanies strenuous exercise. By the time the zombies, ghosts, and werewolves are finished slaughtering everyone in sight, the walls are caked with blood, the earth is doomed, and audiences have had a gory good time. Kill List 2012, directed by Ben Wheatley, Kill List starts off as a disturbing little thriller that takes a shocking turn into Wicker Man territory. The story follows two hit men, J. Neil Maskell and Gal Michael Smiley, hired by a mysterious organization to murder three seemingly random people. Stranger still, the victims all thank Jay before he ends their lives, leaving the assassins completely confused. Ultimately, their kill list leads them into the English countryside where they're attacked by a creepy cult. Gal is savagely murdered, and Jay is forced to battle against a hooded, hunchbacked man. The Mayo Clinic, which listed dehydration as a risk factor for muscle cramps, explained, "Fluids help your muscles contract and relax and keep muscle cells hydrated." The Cleveland Clinic also cited dehydration as a possible cause of nighttime leg cramps. However, not everyone agrees that dehydration leads to muscle cramps. One 2013 study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine concluded that a lack of fluids did not change how likely study participants were to experience muscle cramps. The authors argued that neuromuscular control, the cooperation between your body's muscles and nerves, may play the most important role. As you might assume, this knife fight is no problem for Jay, who's had plenty of killing experience. Another study, led by Dr. He dispatches the hunchback with relative ease, but after stabbing his deformed foe multiple times, he's shocked when the cloak is pulled back to reveal his dying wife, Myanna Buring.
Worse still, the hunchback's bump is actually their young son, Harry Simpson, strapped to his mom's back as part of an occult ritual. Absolutely stunned that he's just butchered his family, Jay disappears into his own mind as the cultists applaud the kill and place a crown atop his head. Long story short, Kill List is one messed up movie. The Guest 2014. The Guest feels like a movie that John Carpenter might have directed in his prime, complete with a madman that just can't be killed. Wing Yin Lao and published in 2019, found that it was actually drinking water after being dehydrated, not the dehydration itself, that caused muscle cramps. The study's authors attributed this to the change in the concentration of electrolytes that drinking water caused. The chaos begins when veteran David Collins Dan Stevens visits the family of a fallen comrade. As such, you may find that drinking water with electrolytes may help. Not drinking enough water can impair brain function. Dehydration may be at the heart of your persistent brain fog. At first, David seems like a cool guy, and he's invited into the family's home, but under that charming, hunky exterior, there's an ultra-aggressive super soldier waiting to explode. Several plot turns and a whole lot of sexual tension later, David is chasing our sibling heroes, Anna Micah Monroe and Luke Brendan Meyer, through a high school haunted house. As nutritionist Mira Desi told Health Digest, often overlooked is the link between dehydration and reduced cognitive performance. And as he's just murdered their parents, chances are pretty good David didn't follow them there for the Halloween dance. Unfortunately for David, he's majorly underestimated his prey, and Luke stabs the psycho in the heart, vampire style. The authorities soon arrive on the scene, and it looks like Anna and Luke are finally safe, until a familiar-looking fireman walks out of the gym, giving Anna a meaningful glance before disappearing into the darkness, Michael Myers style. Only Lovers Left Alive 2014. Two of the sexiest and strangest people on the planet, Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton, were born to play vampires. It doesn't take much, even as little as 1% dehydration can cause changes in your ability to pay attention and remember things. Interestingly, dehydration doesn't appear to affect all areas of brain function to the same degree. So naturally, they're perfect as Adam and Eve, the undead protagonists of Jim Jarmusch's Only Lovers Left Alive. As a 2016 conference paper authored by Matthew T. Whitbrod of Emory University and Melinda Millard Stafford of Georgia Tech revealed, high-order cognitive processing involving attention and executive function and motor coordination appear more susceptible to impairment following dehydration. Lower-order mental processing, such as reaction time, was much less disrupted by the lack of fluids. The researchers noted that dehydration's effects on the brain were particularly noticeable once individuals had lost more than 2% of their body's water. If you're always constipated, you may not be drinking enough water. According to the Mayo Clinic, constipation is defined as having fewer than 3 bowel movements a week. While almost everyone experiences constipation from time to time, for some people constipation becomes a chronic condition, resulting in weeks or even months of infrequent or painful bowel movements. Brooding, mysterious, and artistically inclined, this vampire couple has spent the last several centuries making music, reading books, and hobnobbing with the most creative minds in history. But their erudite existence is threatened after the death of Adam's familiar, Anton Yelchin, and the arrival of some nosy music groupies. UCLA's Gail and Gerald Oppenheimer Family Center for Neurobiology of Stress and Resilience estimated that between 2 and 28% of people in North America suffer from chronic constipation. Although constipation is often blamed on a lack of dietary fiber, the two take off for tangier, but that poses a bit of a problem. Unlike, say, Count Dracula, Adam and Eve don't drink blood straight from human victims. J. Arnaud of Nestlé Water Institute noted that hydration levels also play a critical role. Dehydration was cited as a potential risk factor for constipation in Arnaud's 2003 paper published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Additionally, it was revealed that fluid intake and magnesium sulfate-rich mineral waters were shown to improve constipation, at least in healthy babies. U.S. fearing they might get sick after slurping down a bad batch, they instead buy their supply from hospitals and blood dealers. However, when they arrive in Morocco, the duo quickly runs out of clean blood. News and World Report advised drinking plenty of water as the first step to conquering constipation.
According to the publication, when your body is properly hydrated, less water will be withdrawn from the colon. This ensures soft and easy to pass stool. If you don't drink enough water, you risk getting kidney stones. Kidney stones, aka renal calculi, are hard deposits of minerals and salts that form in the kidneys. They can be quite painful to pass and may even require surgical removal. According to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the incidence of kidney stones is on the rise, especially among women. Approximately 13% of men and 7% of women will experience kidney stones at least once in their life, and once you've had kidney stones, there's around an 80% chance you'll have them again in the next 10 years. The Urology Care Foundation listed dehydration-induced low urine volume as a major risk factor for developing kidney stones. Unable to find a new supplier, they begin wasting away until they spot a couple making out. The foundation explained, writing, "When your urine volume is low, urine is concentrated." Even though biting necks is so 15th century, the desperate creatures approach the young lovers, and right before the screen cuts to black, we see Adam and Eve with their fangs exposed, ready to feast. It Follows 2015, the second movie starring Micah Monroe to make our list. It Follows did something very few horror films ever do, create a truly original monster. Basically an STD on two legs, the titular, it, is spread via sex, and if you contract the curse, this enigmatic monster will mercilessly hunt you down. Concentrated urine means there is less fluid to keep salts dissolved. As such, upping your water intake will help. If you're experiencing any of the symptoms of kidney stones, including a sharp pain in your back or lower abdomen, pain while urinating, or blood in your urine, it's important to see a doctor and, of course, drink more water. Not drinking enough water could make you more susceptible to UTIs according to the US, and if it kills you, it then goes after the person who gave you the curse. And so on forever. Sure, the creature moves pretty slowly, but this thing can take any form necessary to get close enough for the kill. And no matter what, it never stops following, unless you push it into a pool and electrocute it. Department for Health and Human Services, 50% of women will get at least one urinary tract infection (UTI) in their lifetime. This bacterial infection can cause many unpleasant symptoms, including painful and frequent urination, fever, and fatigue. Your level of hydration is one of the factors that influences your chances of getting a UTI. In an article written for Harvard Medical School, Huma Farid, an obstetrician-gynecologist, highlighted research demonstrating that women who drank the most water, their usual amount of fluids plus an additional 1.5 liters of water, had 50% fewer episodes of recurrent UTIs than women who didn't increase their fluid intake. She noted that this is most likely due to the fact that drinking enough water encourages frequent urination, which helps flush bacteria out of the body. It's no surprise, then, that UCLA Urology listed not drinking enough fluids as a risk factor for UTIs. When it comes to your hydration level, your urine may be the best indicator of whether or not you need to drink more fluids. According to Healthline, urine the color of lemonade or light beer indicates optimal hydration, while anything darker is a sign of dehydration. If you're always getting sick, you may not be drinking enough water. Advice to drink a glass of orange juice or eat chicken noodle soup to help recover from a cold may have less to do with the nutrients in these homeopathic remedies and more to do with the fact that both contain a significant amount of water. Nutritionist Lisa Richards told Health Digest, "Drinking enough water is vital to eliminating toxins from the body by fueling the organs with necessary liquid to aid in filtering waste." Well, that's what our hero J. Monroe hopes, anyway. Dehydration causes an accumulation of toxins in the body, resulting in increased susceptibility to illness and taking longer to recover. Houston Methodist Hospital highlighted how important proper hydration is to a well-functioning immune system, writing, "A fluid in your circulatory system called lymph, which carries important infection-fighting immune cells around your body, is largely made up of water. Being dehydrated slows down the movement of lymph, sometimes leading to an impaired immune system." According to WebMD, the lymphatic system acts as a filter for the body, removing waste products from cells and trapping foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses in specialized tissue known as lymph nodes. It also produces lymphocytes, a type of infection-fighting white blood cell. Not drinking enough water can make your allergies worse. If your allergies have been acting up more than usual, it may be a sign that you need to drink more water. After picking up the curse courtesy of a one-night stand, she does her best to fry the monster with every electronic device she can get her hands on. And just to play it safe, she has sex with her friend Paul Keir Gilchrist, who then passes the curse on to a prostitute, just in case the thing comes back. And that leads us to the final eerie image of Jay and Paul walking down a neighborhood street, thinking maybe their terror is finally over. In an interview with CBS News, Dr. Nita Ogden, an allergy specialist and spokesperson for the American College of Allergy, Asthma and Immunology, explained the connection, saying, "Studies have shown that when you're dehydrated your body produces higher histamine levels and that drives allergies. When you get dehydrated you could run the risk of making your symptoms worse." According to WebMD, histamines are chemicals produced by the immune system that play the starring role in an allergic reaction. Once you've been exposed to a trigger, such as pet dander or peanuts, histamines travel to wherever the allergen was detected, causing inflammation. This inflammation produces the telltale signs of an allergy, such as itching, congestion, and swelling. But in the distance, there's a man slowly coming down the sidewalk. It also signals other immune cells to attack and destroy what is actually a harmless foreign substance. Ogden pointed out that the decongestants often used to treat allergies can dry people out, making dehydration even worse. She recommended adding electrolyte powder to plain water to boost its allergy-fighting abilities. Achy joints. You may need to drink more water. If you thought arthritis was a condition that only affected older people, think again. According to the Arthritis Foundation, nearly 1 in 3 Americans between the ages of 18 and 64 are living with arthritis or arthritis symptoms. Of individuals with the condition, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) reported about 50% have persistent joint pain and 1 in 4 have severe joint pain. Interestingly, not drinking enough water can make joint pain worse. As registered dietitian Trista Best explained to Health Digest, the joints contain cartilage that prevents the bones from grinding and rubbing together. Cartilage is roughly 80% water, and when you aren't drinking enough water it becomes less hydrated. This leads to joint pain as a result of increased friction. In addition to plumping up cartilage, water is also the primary component of synovial fluid, according to the Tucson Orthopedic Institute. This fluid surrounds and protects the bones and cartilage of the joint. Maybe it's just a guy getting some exercise, maybe it's someone looking for directions, or maybe it's a creature that can never die, coming back for round 2. The institute also noted that water helps maintain the muscles that support joints. Dehydration can reduce muscle tone by reducing a muscle's ability to contract, thus making the joint more unstable and prone to injury. If you have dry skin, you may not be drinking enough water. Oftentimes, our skin is a reflection of what's going on inside of our bodies, and dehydration is no exception. We never learn for sure as the screen cuts to black, leaving Jay's fate to the imagination. The Invitation 2015, a powerful examination of grief and suffering. Karen Kusama's The Invitation is like Manchester by the Sea with a lot more murder. The story focuses on a man named Will Logan Marshall Green, who's grappling with the loss of his young son. Will's life only gets more complicated after he receives a dinner invitation from his ex-wife Eden Tammy Blanchard. In fact, skin turgor is often used to determine whether or not someone is dehydrated. He isn't the only one to show up at the party. Either Eden has invited all their old friends from back in the day, but this isn't exactly a fun affair. Beneath the polite conversation and idle chit-chat, Will can sense there's something strange going on, even though no one else has the courage to say so. Eden and her new husband David McKeel Hoosman are promoting some bizarre cult, and there's an incredibly eerie giant who looks like John Carroll Lynch lurking in the background, keeping an eye on everyone at the party. As the evening wears on, Will begins to suspect there's foul play afoot, and he's particularly baffled when he spies David walking into the backyard and lighting a red lantern. As BBC Future explained, turgor is a measure of how fast it takes the skin to return to normal if you pinch some skin and lift it up. But Will kind of forgets that little detail when Eden, David, and 2 cult members, Lynch included, go into Charles Manson mode, butchering every guest they can get their hands on. Fortunately, Will survives the assault, but as he steps outside, he sees that almost every house in sight has a red lantern shining outside. If you are dehydrated, your skin will take longer to get its shape back. Skin owes its soft, pliable texture to its water content, according to the American Skin Association. When water is lost, it becomes irritated, rough, and scaly and may peel or itch. Although the association cited dry air as the most common cause of dry skin, it also noted that avoiding dehydration was an important part of supporting skin health from the inside out. In an interview with Harper's Bazaar, dermatologist Justine Hextall explained that well-hydrated skin appears plump and reflects light better, giving it a glowing appearance, while dehydrated skin is less elastic and appears dull and lifeless. She cautioned that for those with naturally dry or sensitive skin, dehydration can be particularly damaging. It's a simple yet haunting image, one that may keep you from attending many dinner parties in the near future. Krampus 2015. Christmas is supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year, but it's hard to enjoy the holidays when your family won't stop bickering. Fed up and frustrated with his unruly relatives, young Max Engel (MJ Anthony) loses the Christmas spirit, tears up his letter to Santa, and tosses the shreds out the window. Little does Max know he's just summoned the biggest Scrooge of all, a horned beast named Krampus who plans on punishing Max's entire family. Soon enough, the Engels and their extended kin are forced to band together in order to fight off waves of satanic toys, killer cookies, and angry elves. But despite their best efforts, Krampus wins the day, casting poor Max down into the underworld, or does he? Shortly after encountering the Christmas demon, Max wakes up to find the whole invasion was just a dream, and soon, he's peacefully celebrating Christmas with his entire family. However, the upbeat mood takes a sharp nosedive when Max finds a little bell with the word, Krampus, etched into the side. It's a gift from the big guy himself, a perverted present that lets Max and his family know they'll have plenty of time to enjoy the holidays because they'll be trapped in Christmas hell for all of eternity. The Witch 2016. Life in the 17th century wasn't a lot of fun, especially if you were living next to a wicked witch. That's something William Ralph Innocent and his Puritan family find out the hard way when they're kicked out of their community and forced into the wilderness. Out in the woods, there are demonic forces everywhere. But while the family's prayers go unanswered, the Prince of Darkness is keeping pretty busy. Showing up as the murderous goat Black Phillip, the devil does a pretty good job of tearing the family apart, quite literally in some cases. Soon, the only member who isn't dead or missing is eldest daughter Thomasin, Anya Taylor-Joy. Left all alone in the middle of nowhere and feeling cut off from the Almighty, Thomasin strikes a deal with Satan, exchanging her soul for the chance to live deliciously. Following Black Phillip's commands, Thomasin strips nude and wanders into the woods, where she discovers a coven of witches convulsing around a fire. Soon, the crones begin to rise into the air, with Thomasin flying right behind them. It's every Puritan's greatest fear come true, but for Thomasin, it's probably the first time she's felt truly free. Get Out 2017. A modern-day masterpiece, Jordan Peele's Get Out almost had a radically different ending. Originally, Peele planned on having his main character, Chris Washington Daniel Kaluuya, arrested after escaping the clutches of the mind-controlling Armitage family. Fortunately, the writer-director had a change of heart and crafted a new ending that left audiences cheering instead of crying. To set the scene, Chris has just narrowly avoided the lobotomy to end all lobotomies, and during his getaway, he murders every evil white person who steps into his path. This eventually ends with Chris standing above his psycho ex-girlfriend as she's bleeding out on a country road. Suddenly, flashing lights appear in the distance, and we assume the worst is about to happen. But instead of the law showing up to cart Chris away, who should step out of the car but Chris's best friend, TSA officer Rod Williams Lil Rel Howery. As Rod takes Chris back to safety, everyone in the audience breathes a sigh of relief, knowing full well this kind of upbeat ending rarely happens in real life. Shaun of the Dead 2004. Granted, most horror films end on a downbeat note, especially zombie movies. For proof, just check out George Romero's entire undead filmography. But fortunately for moviegoers, Edgar Wright decided to break that tradition with Shaun of the Dead. This horror comedy does have its fair share of terrifying moments, like when David is eaten alive, not to mention scenes that will leave you emotionally wrecked for days, like when Shaun is forced to shoot his mom. Honestly, Shaun of the Dead's climax is one of the darkest moments Edgar Wright has ever directed, culminating with Shaun Simon Pegg tearfully saying goodbye to his friend Ed Nick Frost, who's dying of a zombie bite. But in the last scene of the film, Wright sends the audience off with a light-hearted moment between old buddies. After surviving the apocalypse, we see Shaun has somehow corralled a zombified Ed into the garden shed behind his house. And sure, Ed might try to take a bite out of his old pal every now and then, but for the most part, the two are content to sit back, relax, and play video games, just like they did in the good old days. The Descent 2005. The Descent has everything you'd want in a horror film: plenty of gore, great performances, practical effects, and two endings. That's right. There are two versions of this British horror film, one released in the UK and one in the US. And while both are equally dark, the original British version is far superior and far more heartbreaking. The descent follows 6 women who head into an unexplored cave system and find themselves being hunted by a legion of cannibalistic crawlers. The gory film comes to a close after our last surviving character, Sarah Shauna MacDonald, spots a shaft of light atop a hill of bones. Covered in blood, Sarah makes a mad scramble for the exit, leaving the cave-dwelling creatures behind. Emerging into the sunlight, Sarah hops in a car and makes her great escape, but that all comes to a screaming halt when she sees the ghost of her old friend Juno, Natalie Mendoza, a woman Sarah just murdered for having an affair with her husband. That's where the US version ends, with a terrified Sarah haunted by the guilt of her crime. But in the original UK version, there are a few extra seconds that reveal Sarah never escaped the caverns. That whole sequence was just a dream Sarah had after tumbling down a shaft and hitting her head. Once she wakes up, she loses all touch with reality. In her last moments, Sarah sees her long-dead daughter sitting a few feet away, greeting her mother with a birthday cake. The kid died on her birthday, and that trauma has been following Sarah for the entire film. Of course, there's no little girl, and the flames from the birthday candles are really Sarah's torch. Worst of all, there's no exit nearby. Sarah is still trapped, and there's no escaping the crawlers as they move in for the kill. But at least she'll get to share her last few seconds with her daughter, even if it's all in her head. Let the Right One In 2008. At first, it might seem like Let the Right One In ends on an upbeat note. In fact, you might be tempted to describe it as romantic. Two star-crossed lovers, Oscar, a 12-year-old boy, and Eli, a vampire who looks like a young girl, have just escaped a Swedish town filled with sadists and snow. They're bound together by murder and romance, and now they're on a train heading for freedom. Light-sensitive Eli Lena Leandersson is hidden away inside a box, but Oscar Care Hedebrandt keeps the creature company by tapping out sweet Morse code messages, letting Eli know they'll always be together. This is not a happy ending. We've already seen what happens to people who pledge their lives to Eli. In the first half of the film, Eli was palling around with an adult named Håkan, who had the grisly job of hunting down humans and draining them of their blood in order to keep Eli fed. But Håkan eventually botches a job so badly that he knows his arrest is imminent. Wanting to keep Eli safe, he disfigures his own face so the cops can't identify him and won't trace him back to the vampire. In fact, Håkan's dedication to Eli is so extreme that when the vampire shows up for a late-night hospital visit, he lets the undead beast feast on his blood. And really, that's exactly what's in store for Oscar. We already know this kid has both a love for Eli and an obsession with murder. Sooner or later, Oscar will dedicate his life to draining people dry, and sooner or later, he'll find himself haunted by his deeds and replaced by somebody younger after ending up the next meal for an undead adolescent. So much for all that cute Morse code. The Babadook 2014, directed by Jennifer Kent. The Babadook belongs to a very unique subgenre of scary films, movies about parents who can't stand their kids. But unlike other movies in that genre, e.g. The Shining and We Need to Talk About Kevin, The Babadook actually ends on an upbeat note. The terrorized mom overcomes her demons and starts a new life for herself and her son. Of course, the ending leaves audiences wondering just how real those demons actually are. Is the titular spirit a real-life monster or simply a metaphor for the destructive power of repressed grief? Well, the answer is yes. Amelia Essie Davis has a lot of bad stuff happening in her life. She was widowed the same day she gave birth to her pint-sized monster of a son, Samuel Noah Wiseman. Now, whenever she sees her kid, she can only think about her dead husband. Needless to say, Amelia isn't handling her grief well. She's let it fester and grow for so long that there's now a fanged creature with a fondness for pop-up books hanging around her house. The Babadook even possesses Amelia, forcing her to try and murder Samuel. But after driving the demon out, Amelia comes to terms with her grief and sends the Babadook scurrying down to the basement. In the film's final minutes, we see a transformed Amelia in her garden. The aching sadness is gone from her eyes, there's a smile on her face where there wasn't before, and her anger towards Samuel has disappeared. Together, the two search their yard for worms, and after filling a bowl with the creatures, Amelia takes the dish down to the basement, where she offers the worms to the Babadook. Even though she's exorcised the beast, he's still lurking down there, and just like Amelia's grief, he'll never go away completely. But he can't possess her anymore. He's still around, but he's beaten, and while he might roar from time to time, he'll never get out of the basement again. Split 2017. Fair or not, M. Night Shyamalan movies are always judged on the strength of their endings. The Sixth Sense had one of the all-time best plot twists, and since then, audiences have been hoping Shyamalan would top himself someday. But while he's occasionally struggled with sticking the landing, Shyamalan recaptured some of that Sixth Sense glory with Split, a horror film that was secretly a superhero movie the whole time, well, a supervillain movie, if you want to get technical. This 2017 hit follows a disturbed dude named Kevin Wendell Crumb, James McAvoy, a man with 24 personalities bouncing around his brain. Some are friendly, some are dangerous, but the dreaded beast is a straight-up monster, a cannibalistic creature who can scale walls, bend metal, and deflect gunshots. In the final 3 minutes of the film, after the climactic showdown with kidnapping victim Casey Cook, Anya Taylor-Joy, we watch as Kevin examines himself in a mirror, awestruck that he's just survived a shotgun blast to the chest. And that's where the movie proper ends, with Kevin's evil personalities basking in their new abilities and plotting their war on the impure. That right, there would be a killer ending, but as the Split title card gives way to an after-credit scene, a familiar soundtrack kicks in, and the film suddenly cuts to a diner. The horrified patrons are watching a news report about the beast, and this superpowered creature reminds one customer of a previous supervillain called Mr. Glass, the mad genius from Shyamalan's 2002 film, Unbreakable. And that's when see David Dunn, Bruce Willis, sipping coffee at the end of the bar and realizing it's time to grab his green raincoat. In just 1 minute, the entire fabric of the film has been changed. This isn't just a horror movie, it's a stealth sequel to Unbreakable, and one that promises an epic showdown between an unstoppable villain and an immovable hero. A Quiet Place 2018, directed by John Krasinski. A Quiet Place was a critical and commercial smash when it hit theaters in 2018, and one of the reasons the film was so successful is the fact that it features one of the most badass endings in horror movie history. Set in the near future, A Quiet Place focuses on the uber-resourceful Abbott family trying to survive in a world plagued by monsters. These extraterrestrial creatures are blind, but their sense of hearing is incredibly acute. Knock over a lantern, trip on the stairs, or shout in pain, and they'll slice you in half. On top of that, they're covered in a natural bulletproof armor, making them impossible to kill. As a result, the Abbotts must adapt to live in a world without sound, keeping as quiet as possible at all times. Of course, that's just everyday life for Regan Abbott, Millicent Simmons. She's deaf, so communicating every thought with sign language is nothing new for her. Still, her father, Krasinski, desperately hopes to help with her disability, so he spends his spare time designing cochlear implants. Sadly, the devices never really work, but at the end of the film, Regan discovers her hearing aid is actually the super weapon she needs to fight back against the creatures. The creatures' ears are incredibly sensitive, and they can't stand the feedback from Regan's implant. So when she and the surviving family members are trapped in a basement by one of the beasts, Regan turns into Rambo, using her hearing aid to drive one of the monsters crazy. The monster starts to freak out and writhe in pain, allowing Regan's mother, Emily Blunt, to kill the weakened creature with a shotgun blast. Of course, the gunshot attracts the other nearby aliens, but the Abbotts aren't afraid. For once, they've got the upper hand, and as the evil ETs make a beeline for the basement, Regan gets her new weapon ready, and her mom racks another shell into her shotgun, ready to make some noise. Drag Me to Hell 2009. Drag Me to Hell is ostensibly a horror comedy, but despite the gross-out gags, this 2009 film has one of the most shocking endings in horror history. When loan officer Christine Brown, Alison Lohman, refuses to extend a gypsy woman's mortgage, the vengeful old crone snatches a button off Christine's sleeve and uses it to curse our poor hero. In 3 days, a demon called the Lamia will drag Christine to hell, and he's going to torture her every second until that devilish date. However, Christine discovers a way to escape the Lamia's clutches. If she gives the cursed button away, she can't avoid winding up in the underworld. Ready to get some revenge of her own, Christine gifts the button to the evil gypsy. Granted, that's a little complicated since the old woman died right after hexing Christine, but that doesn't stop her from digging up the corpse and shoving the button down her throat. Only there's one little problem. Christine has been keeping the button in an envelope. Unfortunately, her boyfriend Justin Long has an identical envelope with a rare coin inside, and Christine gets the two confused. So after her late-night cemetery excursion, she goes to meet her beau at a train station, and that's when he casually mentions finding the button in his car. Terrified of what's about to happen, Christine absolutely freaks out, staggering backwards in shock, tumbling off the railway platform, and landing on the train tracks below. But before she can get mercifully squished by an oncoming locomotive, the ground opens up, and she's dragged into hell by a mob of fiery arms. That look of horror on Long's face. That's what everybody is feeling as Christine screams and begs for help. But there's no happy ending here, no last-minute rescue. The Lamia will feast on Christine's soul for eternity, and with a hard cut to a creepy title card, that's one hell of a way to end a horror movie. Resolution 2013, directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Scott Moorhead. Resolution is a deeply unsettling film about two friends who are trapped in a real-life horror movie. When graphic designer Michael Peter Salella receives a mysterious video from his junkie friend Chris Vinnie Curran, Michael decides it's intervention time. Chris spends his days doing meth and shooting guns into the sky, so Michael drives out to the country, handcuffs Chris to a pipe, and forces his buddy to go cold turkey. However, the intervention veers into spooky territory when Michael starts discovering photos, records, and slides all around Chris' cabin. They all depict incredibly creepy stories that usually end in death, and things get way scarier when Michael and Chris start finding videos of themselves, videos that show them getting murdered by druggies. The two eventually realize they're the victims of an evil entity that sees them as characters in a horror story. Terrified, Michael and Chris try their best to outsmart the beast, and near the end of the film, it looks like they've created the perfect ending. The druggies who've been threatening them throughout the film are killed, the haunted cabin is set ablaze, and Chris decides to go to rehab. It's the perfect happy ending, one they hope will set them free, only the entity likes its endings dark. As the cabin burns to the ground, the entity rears its monstrous head and confronts the two characters. Desperate for a second chance, Michael begs, "Can we try it another way?" That's when the entity lets loose with a dreadful roar, and the film cuts to black. It's a perfectly ambiguous ending, but if you're wondering what happened to Michael and Chris, you should check out the follow-up film, The Endless. We'll just say that Michael comes to regret his wish. The Blackcoat's Daughter 2015, horror movies often have twisted endings, but The Blackcoat's Daughters is just downright sad. Directed by Oz Perkins, this atmospheric film follows two teenage girls left behind at a boarding school. The semester is over, but these two are stuck, their parents nowhere in sight. That's perfectly fine with Rose Lucy Boynton, a senior with a secret she needs to deal with. But poor Kat Kiernan Shipka, in a phenomenally creepy performance, isn't handling the abandonment well. Thanks to a creepy dream about her parents' fate, she fears she'll be left alone forever. So naturally, Kat makes a deal with the devil. Hey, you're never alone if you've got an evil spirit inside you. And while the demon makes her commit ghastly murders, poor Rose Kat legitimately feels at peace. But after she's caught by the cops, an exorcist kicks the demon out of Kat, and even though she begs the spirit to stay, Old Scratch drifts away, leaving Kat all alone. Years later, Kat, now played by Emma Roberts, has escaped from a mental hospital and plans on returning to her school, hoping to find her demonic buddy. Along the way, she's picked up a middle-aged couple, James Reamer and Lauren Holly, who happen to be the parents of Rose, the senior that Kat decapitated back in the day. Things don't end well for the distraught parents, but when Kat shows up at the school with two fresh heads in tow, the demon is nowhere to be found. That's when it hits Kat that she'll be alone forever, and the film ends with her crying in the snow, abandoned by everyone, God, man, and the devil. Crimson Peak 2015, directed by Guillermo del Toro. Crimson Peak tells the devastating story of Edith Cushing, Mia Wasikowska, an American heiress who marries charming English aristocrat Thomas Sharp, Tom Hiddleston. Sharp is an inventor who lives in a mansion ravaged by time, a dying house sinking into the blood-red earth. And when Edith arrives at Sharp's crumbling estate, she learns she won't exactly be the lady of the house, as Thomas lives with his cold, calculating sister, Lucille Jessica Chastain. Actually, Thomas and Lucille are doing way more than just living together. In addition to having an incestuous relationship, the penniless siblings have been keeping afloat by getting Thomas hitched to wealthy women and then killing off the unlucky brides. Thanks to some frightening but friendly ghosts, Edith discovers she's next on the Sharps list, but a love-struck Thomas agrees to help Edith escape. Unfortunately, a jealous Lucille shanks Loki in the face, and now it's just the two ladies squaring off in the snow. Lucille morphs into a ghostly slasher, fluttering through the fog as Edith holds her off with a knife. And just as Lucille moves in for the kill, she's distracted by the sight of her spectral brother, giving Edith enough time to cave her head in with a shovel. With Lucille down and out, Edith gives her ghostly husband one last goodbye before he disappears into nothingness. Edith then leaves Crimson Peak forever, but as our hero narrates over the final scene, explaining that some ghosts are trapped here forever because they're bound by powerful emotions, we see the dark spirit of Lucille, sitting at her piano, playing a mournful lullaby for time eternal. Sure, it's simple, but it's the perfect ending for this gothic tale, a tragic finale haunted by heartbreak. Alien Covenant 2016. The Alien series has never been a feel-good franchise, but when it comes to downbeat endings, Alien Covenant goes darker than any previous entry. This horror flick finds the colony ship Covenant headed for the distant world of Origai 6. The vessel is a crowded one, loaded with over 1,000 human embryos and 2,000 colonists in cryosleep. They hope to wake up in a new world full of new possibilities, but these sleeping souls have no idea the crew has made an ill-fated detour to a nearby planet, one that's home to killer aliens and a psychopathic android named David Michael Fassbender. We first met David in Prometheus, and his disdain for humans has only grown since the first film. Now, he views people simply as subjects for his experiments to create a new extraterrestrial life form. In fact, he'd like to run a few tests on Covenant officer Daniels Catherine Watterson, but she escapes David's grasp with the help of Walter Fassbender again, an android who's the same model as David, only way better when it comes to his people skills. After Walter defeats David off-screen, mind you, he returns to the Covenant with Daniels and puts her into cryosleep for their long journey ahead. But moments before going under, Walter's kindly smile morphs into a sadistic smirk, and Daniels realizes this isn't her robo-body, it's David. That's when the panic sets in, but there's nothing she can do as David puts her to bed. With Daniels out of the way, David coughs up 2 alien embryos, turns on Wagner's Entry of the Gods into Valhalla, and then strolls through the massive cryochamber, admiring the pods and pods full of sleeping colonists. This mad scientist is going to be busy for a long time. Mother 2017, directed by Darren Aronofsky, Mother is one part biblical allegory, one part environmental metaphor, and totally disturbing from beginning to end. Jennifer Lawrence stars as the titular Mother, wife of a beloved poet known simply as him, Javier Bardem. However, their little world is threatened by the arrival of a creepy couple, murderous brothers, and a mob of angry, violent people, all hellbent on destroying Mother's house. Once you realize that Mother represents Mother Earth and him as God, things start clicking into place. The film rehashes the story of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and Noah's flood.
When Mother's newborn baby is murdered by the masses, that's symbolic of Christ's crucifixion. And when it comes to communion, well, we see that in all its bloody horror. All the people him has welcomed into his home begin destroying everything in sight, desecrating the planet Earth, if you will. And Mother can only take so much abuse for so long. After the death of her baby, Mother snaps and fights back by setting the house on fire. The house is burned to ash, the people are purged away by flames, but since him is an immortal being, he survives without a single burn. The all-powerful poet, creator of words and worlds, picks up Mother's charred body and removes a crystal from her chest, taking the last of her love so he can rebuild his home, create a new wife, and start over again. And that's how this horror show ends, with the cycle beginning anew, all because him craves praise and affection for his literary creations. Of course, almost nobody got this far in the film, as most people checked out after that baby buffet. Annihilation 2018. For all its sci-fi trappings, Annihilation is very much a horror movie. It's got hideous mutants, that freaky skull bear, extreme body horror, snake intestines, and uber creepy plant people. But perhaps the most terrifying and claustrophobic scene comes when Natalie Portman encounters a mysterious being that mirrors her every move. Annihilation finds Portman playing Lena, a soldier-turned-scientist who's haunted by guilt and regret. Her military husband, Kane Oscar Isaac, has disappeared after venturing into the Shimmer, an electromagnetic field spreading across the southern U.S. Lena blames herself for Kane's disappearance, as her bad choices might have driven her husband to a suicide mission. But a year after vanishing, Kane reappears, confused, missing memories, and incredibly sick. Wanting to know what happened to Kane, Lena joins a scientific team heading into the Shimmer, which refracts and combines everything from memories to DNA. After witnessing some grisly sights, she winds up at a lighthouse where she meets a metallic humanoid, a creature that copies her movements and steals her likeness. A horrified Lena tries to escape, but the humanoid won't let her leave. It even pins her against the door, suffocating Lena with the weight of its body. Basically, Lena is fighting herself, her own self-destructive tendencies, and with the help of a grenade, she escapes from the lighthouse. And this right here is where things get ambiguous. Did the real Lena escape, or is this her double? When she hugs her husband, who we know is a doppelganger, both their eyes dance and change colors, just like the Shimmer. So is this the real Lena? Well, it really doesn't matter. The only thing that does is that Lena has changed. The woman who walked into the Shimmer has come out a completely different person. The Shimmer lives on, and the Lena we once knew is no more. Upgrade 2018, a gory blend of sci-fi action and body horror. Upgrade is set in a near future where most humans are totally cool with having technological implants. The one exception is Gray Trace, Logan Marshall Green, an old-fashioned mechanic, but after a gang of thugs kill his wife and leave him paralyzed, Gray finds himself totally reliant on technology. Thanks to an oddly benevolent billionaire, Gray has been implanted with an AI named STEM, who's kind of like HAL 9000 meets Bruce Lee. STEM connects Gray's brain to his body, allowing him to move around for the first time in months. He's also oddly keen on helping Gray find his wife's killers. Together, the two stalk the streets, dishing out grisly deaths to the crooks who ruined Gray's life. But as Gray becomes more and more focused on revenge, he loses sight of his real enemy, the AI inside his head. At the end of the film, Gray discovers STEM has been pulling the strings all along. The AI desperately wanted to be human and thought Gray, a guy without any other implants, was the perfect host, so he turned the mechanic into a widowed quadriplegic. And once he got inside Gray's brain, he murdered anyone who knew of his existence, from the killers to his creator. That way, nobody could stop him from disappearing into the world. STEM's coup de grace comes when he attempts to murder an innocent detective. Holding tight to his last shreds of humanity, Gray fights back, desperately trying to save the cop's life. And in that struggle, Gray's mind finally breaks. His brain goes limp, and STEM locks him away in a dream world, a paradise where his wife is still alive. In some ways, it's a happy ending for Gray, but as he reunites with his wife, STEM takes control of Gray's body and sets out to live the life of a human, with Gray's consciousness imprisoned forever. Hereditary 2018, written and directed by Ari Aster, Hereditary is a truly messed up film with an incredibly deranged ending. Basically, the movie follows a doomed family that's being manipulated into bringing a demon named Paimon into the world. Paimon is one of the 8 kings of hell, and for last few years, he's been possessing a strange little girl named Charlie, Millie Shapiro. But sexist Paimon would prefer to possess a male, so his followers plot to transfer the spirit into Charlie's older brother, Peter, Alex Wolff. Of course, that involves a rather complicated ritual where you have to decapitate Charlie, host a disturbing séance, and set Gabriel Byrne on fire. And after Peter's mom Annie, Toni Collette, is demonically possessed, the cult of Paimon can finally put their king into Peter's poor body. In the last few minutes of this terrifying film, Peter is chased around the house by his now evil mom, who's become part Jack Torrance and part Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Creepier still, everywhere Alex runs, he keeps bumping into naked, aging cult members. And to cap everything off, Alex watches in horror as his mom saws her own head off with a wire. This kid is having a rough night. It's all too much for Peter, who throws himself out a window and ends up getting controlled by Paimon anyway. In the film's final scene, a possessed Peter is surrounded by worshipful cult members, the beheaded corpses of his mom and grandmom, and a freaky shrine that prominently features Charlie's decapitated head. In other words, the ending of Hereditary is completely bonkers, and after it's done, you'll never step foot in a treehouse again. Mandy 2018, Mandy is a blood-soaked acid trip of a movie that perfectly blends a whole host of genres, from romance and fantasy to angry revenge thriller. But in its heavy metal heart, Mandy is a horror film, complete with monstrous bikers from Hellraiser and a murderous cult from Spawn Ranch. The film finds Nicolas Cage as Red Miller, a lumberjack who wants revenge for his murdered wife, Mandy Andrea Riseborough. And that means doing battle with demons and getting into chainsaw fights with psycho hippies. From the moment his wife is immolated, the most horrific scene in the movie, Red begins to lose his mind. It doesn't help any when he samples some of the world's trippiest LSD, which plunges him deep into the cosmic darkness. His eyes become fireballs of rage, his face is absolutely caked with gore, and in the film's final minutes, he hunts down the members of the hippie cult and puts his freshly forged axe to good use. When he finally confronts the insecure cult leader, Jeremiah Sand, Linus Roach, he crushes the man's skull with his hands before setting Sand's church on fire. As the building burns down, Red climbs into a car and drives away from the destruction, and for a moment, everything is peaceful. The blood is gone from his face, and he sees the spirit of Mandy riding shotgun. He flashes back to the moment they first met, both at a club, wearing identical t-shirts, but then reality comes crashing back hard. Red is still soaked with gore and grinning like a madman. And as he drives off to nowhere, we see two eerie planets hanging over the horizon. Does Mandy take place in another universe? Has Red lost himself to grief and LSD, and are we seeing his hallucinations? Can he see beyond a veil that few others can pass? It's a truly freaky moment, and one that's bound to stir up debate between horror fans for years to come.